What does it take to finally make someone leave the greatest city in the world? Because here's what's actually happening right now, and these are real numbers. In 2025 alone, 114,000 more people left New York City than moved in from other parts of the country. That's not a pandemic blip. That's not a rumor. That's a documented, ongoing exodus, and it's accelerating. Middle-class families, millennials, working professionals, people who built their entire lives around this city are packing up and going. So today we're answering the question nobody wants to ask out loud. Why is everyone leaving New York? Here are 10 reasons, backed by data. Let's get into it. Let's start with the most obvious one, because the numbers are genuinely staggering. The median asking rent in New York City hit $3,585 per month in 2025. And in the first quarter of 2026, it climbed again to $3,616. To afford that by standard financial guidelines, where rent should be no more than 30% of your income, you need to be earning around $145,000 a year. The median household income in New York City? About $85,500. Do that math. The average New Yorker is being priced out of the average New York apartment. And homeownership isn't a backup plan. It's essentially a fantasy for most residents. So people are left with one option: leave. Florida is now the #1 destination for departing New Yorkers, followed by New Jersey, Connecticut, and Texas. These aren't people who hate New York. These are people who simply cannot afford to stay. Here's what surprises people about the exodus. It's not the poorest residents leaving at the highest rates. And it's not the ultra-wealthy. They can absorb the costs. The people leaving fastest? The middle class. Data tracking 24 million real moves shows that people earning between $51,000 and $200,000 a year make up the largest chunk of people walking out of New York City. These are teachers, nurses, mid-level managers, creative professionals, exactly the people a city needs to function. A Citizens Budget Commission report put it plainly. The loss of working and middle-class residents reflects a city that no longer offers them enough value for what it costs. They're not being pushed out by poverty. They're being pushed out by math. New York hits residents with a triple tax burden that's almost unmatched anywhere in the country. You pay federal income tax. You pay New York State income tax, one of the highest in the U.S. And then New York City adds its own income tax on top of that. Live and work in the 5 boroughs, and you could be handing over more than 50 cents of every dollar you earn to various levels of government. For high earners, this has been a deal breaker for years. But increasingly, it's also pushing out the middle class, people who aren't rich enough to absorb it and aren't making so little that it doesn't register. Add property taxes, sales tax, and the hidden tax of just being in New York. Overpriced everything, toll roads, parking, and the total cost of life here is crushing. Texas has no state income tax. Florida has no state income tax. That's not a coincidence. It's a billboard. And New Yorkers are reading it. If you want to understand why this exodus matters long-term, look at who's doing most of the leaving. Millennials. Millennials are leaving New York at higher rates than any other generation right now. And this isn't because they aged out of city life. It's because the city stopped working for them. Remote work changed everything. When you had to be in a Manhattan office 5 days a week, the brutal rent and tiny apartment was the price you paid. But when you can do your job from anywhere, suddenly that same money buys you a 3-bedroom house in Austin, a condo with a pool in Miami, or a home with an actual yard in Philadelphia. And millennials, the generation that delayed homeownership longer than any before them, are now at the age where they want space, stability, and the possibility of a backyard. New York City cannot offer that, so they leave. New York City is actually not as dangerous as the perception suggests. Crime rates are significantly lower than they were in the 80s and 90s. But perception matters in migration decisions, and the perception of public safety in New York has taken a real hit, particularly around the subway system. High-profile incidents on the subway, visible homelessness, and a general sense that certain public spaces feel unsafe has made many residents, particularly families and older New Yorkers, uncomfortable in ways they weren't before. And when you factor in the cost of living, safety concerns become the tipping point. When someone is already stretched thin, paying $3,500 a month in rent, and they no longer feel safe on their morning commute, the cost-benefit calculation of staying in New York collapses very quickly. For families, the school system is one of the defining factors in where they choose to live. And New York City's public school system is deeply uneven. There are exceptional public schools in the city, but access to them is largely determined by where you can afford to live. Which brings us back to rent. The neighborhoods with the best public schools tend to have the highest rents. And the private school alternative? In New York, that can run $50,000 to $60,000 per year, per child. The data reflects this reality. New York City's school-age population has been shrinking. The city lost over 100,000 school-age children during the pandemic years, and while enrollment has crept back slightly, it's been driven largely by incoming migrants rather than by families choosing to stay and raise kids here. Families are making a simple calculation. The same money that buys a cramped two-bedroom apartment in New York buys a house in a suburb with a highly rated public school system and a backyard. The decision isn't complicated, it's just painful. New York City asks a lot of its residents. It asks you to pay more, live in less space, deal with more noise, more crowds, more delays, and more friction in every single part of your daily life, in exchange for access to the opportunities and energy that only New York can provide. For decades, people made that trade happily. The city delivered enough to justify what it cost. But the perception is growing that the trade has become unbalanced. Streets that aren't clean enough, subway delays that are too frequent, services that don't match what residents pay in taxes. The Citizens Budget Commission said it directly. The city must offer enough value to keep people here. And many residents no longer feel like it does. It's not any single thing. It's the accumulation of daily friction. The commute, the trash, the noise, the cost, the competition for everything from apartments to restaurant reservations that wears people down until one day they just decide, enough. Before 2020, New York City had a geographic lock on certain kinds of careers. Finance, media, fashion, advertising, tech. If you wanted those jobs, you needed to be in New York. Full stop. Remote work shattered that lock permanently. Millions of New Yorkers spent 2 years working from home and discovered something uncomfortable. They could do their jobs just as well, sometimes better, from somewhere with lower rent, more space, and a quieter life, and many of their employers agreed. Even as companies have pushed for return to office, the genie is not going back in the bottle. The people who left during the pandemic for Austin, Miami, or the suburbs and kept their New York salaries learned that you can have the career and the life. You don't have to choose anymore. And that realization has permanently changed what New York is competing against. New York isn't just losing people, it's losing them to specific places, and those places are getting better at competing for residents. Florida takes the top spot, capturing nearly 17% of everyone leaving New York City. And it's not just retirees anymore. Miami has built a genuine tech and finance scene. Tampa is growing fast. The weather sells itself. Texas is right behind. Austin attracted a wave of tech companies and young professionals throughout the early 2020s. Dallas and Houston offer major city energy at a fraction of the cost. And then there's the Northeast alternative, Philadelphia. Over 25% of Philadelphia's newcomers in 2025 came from New York City. That's remarkable. People are choosing a city just 90 minutes away, one that offers a lot of the same culture, food scene, and energy, but at roughly half the cost. New York used to have no serious competition for the kind of person who wanted a big city life with big career opportunities. It has competition now. This last reason is the one that ties everything together. And it's the one that the city's own budget commission used to describe what's happening. The value proposition of New York City is breaking down. For generations, New York worked because the deal was clear. You pay more, you sacrifice space and ease, and in return you get access to the best of everything. The best careers, the best culture, the best restaurants, the best energy, the best opportunity to become whoever you want to be. No other city on earth offered that trade, so people took it. What's happening now is that the cost side of that equation has gone up dramatically, while the value side has plateaued or, in some areas, declined. The careers can be had elsewhere. The culture can be found elsewhere. The opportunity is no longer exclusively housed on this island. And so people, not all at once, not in a panic, but steadily and consistently, are asking themselves, is it still worth it? For 114,000 more people in 2025 than the year before, the answer was no. Here's what I want to be clear about before you go. New York City is not dying. It has been written off before, in the 1970s, in the early 90s, and it came back stronger every time. But this moment is different in one key way. The forces pushing people out, remote work, the rise of competing cities, housing costs, are structural. They're not going to fix themselves. The city is going to have to earn back its residents in a way it has never had to before. Whether it will? That's the real question. And honestly, the answer matters not just for New Yorkers. It matters for how we think about cities, affordability, and what we owe the people who keep these places running. If this got you thinking, drop a comment below. Are you one of the people who left? Are you thinking about it? Are you staying no matter what? I want to hear from you. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.